The sun hammered down on the parched earth, turning the auction yard into a furnace of dust and sweat. Flies buzzed in lazy circles, settling on the hides of cattle penned nearby, their lowing a dull chorus to the indifferent sky. She stood on the splintered wooden block, bare feet blistered from the heat rising through the planks, her dress a faded calico rag clinging to her skin like a second layer of shame. The rope around her wrists chafed, not tight enough to cut, but enough to remind her she was no longer her own. The air smelled of manure and tobacco spit, thick and choking, and the horizon stretched flat and merciless, mocking any thought of escape. Her eyes stung from the glare, but she kept them fixed on a distant butte, its red rock scarred like an old wound. Inside, a hollow ache spread, not just from the hunger gnawing at her belly, but from the knowledge that this was it, the end of pretending she had worth. The auctioneer's gavel cracked like a whip, and the murmurs rose, then fell. $3. That's what the bidding stalled at. Less than a sack of flour, less than a broken plowshare. She felt the weight of eyes on her, appraising, dismissing. No one bid higher. The world didn't flinch. He was there in the sparse crowd. A tall man with a face carved by wind and loss, his hat pulled low against the sun, his boots were caked in trail dust, and his coat hung loose over broad shoulders that spoke of years, breaking horses and mending fences. He raised a hand, slow and deliberate, and the auctioneer nodded. Sold. The word hung in the air like smoke. She didn't look at him, couldn't. Her knees trembled as they led her down, the rope tugging her forward. Into the glare, the crowd parted, disinterested, already turning to the next lot of sway-backed mule worth twice as much. He took the rope without a word, his fingers rough but not cruel as he untied her wrists. Rubbed raw skin met the open air, and she winced, pulling her arms close to her chest. The ranch smelled faintly of leather and sage on him, cutting through the yard stench. He led her to a wagon hitched to a pair of bays, their coats lathered from the long ride, and she climbed up without protest, the wood groaning under her slight weight, and sat rigid on the bench, staring at the reins in his hands. The wagon lurched forward, wheels crunching over gravel, leaving the yard behind in a cloud of dust that choked the throat and blurred the past. The land unfolded around them, vast and unforgiving. Mesquite bushes clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. Heat mirages danced on the trail, turning the world into a fever dream. She felt the jolt of every rut, each one echoing the bruises from nights beforehands that grabbed, voices that bartered her away like a bad debt. Her pose face flickered in her mind, gaunt and desperate, signing her over to settle a tab in some god-forsaken saloon. It'll be better, he'd slurred, but his eyes said otherwise. Abandoned twice now, once by blood, once by fate. The sun dipped, lower, painting the sky in blood-red streaks, and still, they rode in silence. Her throat burned for water, but she didn't ask. Asking meant owing. As dusk crept in, the air cooled, carrying the faint scent of creosote after a rare rain. The wagon crested a low rise, and there it was, the ranch, hunkered against the plain like a stubborn fist. Adobe walls weathered to the color of old bone, a corral empty save for a few horses nickering softly. Smoke curled from the chimney, thin and wavering, promising warmth she didn't trust. He pulled the team to a halt, the sudden quiet pressing in like judgment. She slid down, legs numb, the ground hard under her feet. He gestured toward the house, his voice low and gravel-rough when he finally spoke. "Name's Elias, this here's home now." She followed him inside, the door creaking on rusty hinges. The room was sparse, a table scarred from use, a stove glowing faintly, shadows dancing on the walls from a single lantern. He set a tin plate before her, beans and cornbread, steam rising like a ghost. Her hands shook as she ate, the food sticking in her throat, but it filled the void, if only for a moment. He watched from across the table, not staring, but seeing. "What do they call you?" he asked, voice steady as the land outside. "Annie," she whispered, the name tasting like ash. It was Hamas, dead too young from fever, leaving her to scrape by in a world that chewed up the weak. He nodded, pouring water from a jug. "Reckon that won't do. Folks round here might know it, tie it to trouble. We'll call you Clara. Means clear, like the sky after a storm." She met his eyes then, gray as winter clouds, holding no pity, only a quiet resolve. The name settled on her like a borrowed coat, ill-fitting but warm. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters, whispering secrets through the cracks. She wondered if this was mercy or just another chain, forged different but binding all the same. The lamp flickered, casting long shadows, and for the first time in days, the ache in her chest eased, just a fraction. Like a crack in parched earth waiting for rain. The days bled into one another, each dawn breaking over the ranch with a cold, unyielding light. Clara woke to the creak of the floorboards under Elias's boots, his shadow moving through the dim kitchen before the sun had fully risen. The air carried the bite of early frost, seeping through the thin walls, and she pulled the rough wool blanket tighter around her shoulders. It smelled of lye and cedar, a scent that grounded her, tethering her to this strange new place. She rose from the pallet by the hearth, her body stiff, the ache in her bones, a quiet reminder of the auction block, the rope, the $3. that had marked her worth. Outside, the land was a study in endurance, scrub grass clinging to life, cottonwoods leaning against the wind, their leaves whispering secrets of survival. Clara learned the rhythm of the ranch through small tasks. Elias set for her, fetching water from the creek, its current icy and sharp against her hands, mending fences with wire that bit her fingers, feeding the chickens that scratched in the dust, their clucks a soft mockery of her own hunger. She moved through the work in silence, her thoughts a tangle of memory and mistrust. The past clung to her like damp cloth, her past slurred promises, the men who'd bartered her away. The nights spent curled in doorways, waiting for a kindness that never came. Elias didn't push her to speak. He worked alongside her, his hand steady as he repaired a gate or sharpened a blade, his presence solid but not suffocating. Once, as they hauled water from the creek, he pointed to a hawk circling above, its wings cutting clean arcs against the sky. "See how it waits," he said, voice low, patient, "knows the right moment'll come." She nodded, unsure if he meant the hawk or something else. Something about her. His words hung in the air, simple but heavy, like stones smoothed by a river dot at night. By the flicker of the lantern, memories came unbidden. She saw her ma's face, pale and thin, singing hymns in a voice like cracked porcelain before the fever. Took her, she saw the saloon, the whiskey-soaked laughter, the hands that grabbed her wrists when her pa turned away. The images came sharp and unmerciful, cutting through the quiet of the ranch house. Clara pressed her palms to her eyes, willing them gone, but they lingered, stitching themselves into the fabric of her sleep. She dreamed of running, her feet bleeding on jagged rocks, the horizon always out of reach. One evening, as the sky burned orange and the air grew thick with the scent of sage, Elias handed her a pair of boots, worn but sturdy, the leather softened by years of use. "Found 'em in the barn," he said, setting them by her pallet. "Too small for me. Might fit you." She stared at them, the gesture small but seismic, like a crack in a dam. No one had given her anything without expecting payment, whether in coin or something uglier. She slipped them on, the leather cool against her blistered feet, and felt a strange weight lift, if only for a moment. The work grew harder as winter loomed. A calf went missing, and Elias saddled a horse, motioning for her to follow. They rode out across the plain, the wind cutting like a blade, the grass brittle under hoofbeats. Clara clung to the saddle, her hands numb, her breath clouding in the air. They found the calf caught in a thicket, bawling and half-frozen. Elias worked it free, his movements sure, while Clara held the reins, her heart pounding not from the cold, but from the way he trusted her to stay, to help. As they rode back, the calf slung across his saddle. He glanced at her. "You did? Good, Clara." The words landed soft like snow, and she turned her face away, afraid he'd see the flush of warmth they brought. Back at the ranch, the fire crackled, casting shadows that danced like ghosts on the walls. Clara sat by the hearth, the boots still on, their weight a quiet anchor. Elias whittled at a piece of wood, the knife moving with a rhythm that matched the fire's pulse. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the world. But here, in this small room, there was a stillness she didn't trust yet, couldn't deny. She wondered what he saw when he looked at her. Not the girl sold for $3, but someone else, someone named Clara, clear as the sky after a storm. The thought scared her, not because it was false, but because it might be true. Winter settled over the ranch like a heavy quilt, the air sharp with the scent of pine smoke and frozen earth. Clara's breath fogged the window pane as she stared out at the snow-dusted plains. The world muted and still under its white shroud. The boots Elias had given her crunched against the frost as she stepped outside each morning, the cold biting at her cheeks, a reminder that life here demanded grit. She milked the cow in the dim barn, her hands raw from the pail's handle, the animal's warmth seeping through its hide like a reluctant gift. The milk steamed in the bucket, pure and untainted, and for a moment, she allowed herself to feel the small victory of it. Elias taught her to ride, his voice steady as he adjusted the stirrups on the old mare. "Keep your heels down, eyes forward," he said, his hand briefly on her shoulder, not lingering, but enough to steady her. The horse shifted beneath her, muscles rippling, and as they trotted out into the open, the wind whipped her hair, carrying the tang of sage buried under snow. She gripped the reins tight, fear and exhilaration twisting in her gut like barbed wire. Riding felt like freedom, but she knew better than to trust it. Freedom had teeth, had left her soiled and scarred before. Memories ambushed her in quiet moments. By the fire one night, as Elias mended a harness, the leather creaking under his needle, Clara's mind drifted to the wagon train that had carried her west years ago. Her pa's laughter then, rough but real, before the bottle hollowed him out. The nights around campfires, stars pricking the sky like pinpoints of hope, until fever claimed her ma and left them adrift. She blinked back the sting, focusing on the flames dancing in the hearth, their heat a bomb against the chill inside. Elias glanced up, his eyes catching hers. "Cold gets in the bones," he murmured, "but it passes." She nodded, wondering if he meant the weather or something deeper, something he carried too. The shift came gradual, like thaw after a hard freeze. Clara found herself anticipating the day's work not out of fear, but a budding purpose. She baked bread in the iron stove, the dough yielding under her knuckles, rising golden and fragrant. Elias ate it without comment, but the way he lingered at the table spoke volumes. One afternoon, as they repaired a section of fence toppled by wind, a storm rolled in sudden and fierce. Thunder cracked overhead, rain lashing the earth into mud. They ran for the barn, soaked through, laughter bubbling unexpected from her throat as water dripped from his hat brim. He looked at her then, surprise softening his features. "Ain't heard that before," he said. She flushed, the sound foreign, even to her ears, like a bird freed from a cage. But trust was a fragile thing, cracked by doubt. When a neighbor rode up one day, hat in hand, asking after strays, his eyes lingered on Clara too long, appraising. "New hand?" he asked Elias, voice laced with curiosity. Elias's jaw tightened. "Family," he replied, the word hanging heavy. The man nodded and rode off, but Clara felt the old fear coil in her belly, memories of auction eyes and bartered worth. That night, she packed a small bundle bread, a blanket ready to slip away before dawn. Better alone than waiting for the betrayal, the sale, the abandonment. She sat by the window, the moon casting silver over the snow, when Elias stirred from his room. He didn't startle, just poured coffee and sat across from her. "Going somewhere." His voice was even, no accusation. She clutched the bundle, words stuck in her throat. "Can't stay, you'll tire of it. Sell me off like the rest." He set the cup down, the clink loud in the quiet. "Ain't like that. Lost my own once wife, child to the fever. Bought you to right a wrong maybe. Give you what I couldn't save." The admission hung between them, raw as an open wound. She searched his face, seeing the lines etched by grief, the quiet strength that had pulled her from the block. The crossroads loomed in that moment. The choice stuck, flee into the cold unknown, or risk the warmth of hope. Outside, the wind moaned, snow swirling like ghosts, but inside, the fire popped, steady and inviting. Clara unclenched her fists, the bundle slipping to the floor. "What if it breaks?" she whispered. Elias met her gaze. "Then we mend it, like the fence, like the land." She nodded, the decision settling like roots in soil, tentative but taking hold. The night stretched on, but for the first time, the silence felt like companionship, not solitude. Spring thawed, the land slow and deliberate. The snow melting into rivulets that carved paths through the dirt, carrying away the hardness of winter. Clara felt it in her bones, a loosening, as if the frost inside her was giving way to the air. Smelled of wet earth and budding sage, sharp and promising, and she walked the ranch with a surer step, the boots molding to her feet like they belonged. Their mornings, she rose before Elias now, kindling the fire, the flames leaping to life under her hands, their warmth seeping into the room like a quiet affirmation. The work evolved with the season. They planted a small garden behind the house beam, corn, a few hardy tomatoes, the soil yielding under the hoe, dark and fertile after the melt. Clara knelt in the dirt, her fingers pressing seeds into furrows, the earth cool and forgiving against her skin. Elias worked beside her, his silence, companionable, broken only by the occasional instruction. "Deeper there. Give him room to root." She watched him, the way his hands moved with purpose, scarred from years of toil but gentle with the fragile shoots. In those moments, the past flickered less sharply, her pose abandonment, a distant echo. The auction block, a scar fading under. New skin one afternoon, as the sun hung high and merciless, beating down like it had that day in the yard. A letter arrived with the supply wagon. The driver handed it to Elias, dust-coated and worn, addressed in a scrawled hand Clara recognized with a jolt. She froze by the corral, watching Elias read it, his face unchanging as stone. He folded it without a word, tucking it into his coat, but later, by the supper table, he slid it across to her. "For you," he said, voice even. The paper trembled in her grasp, the words blurring, regret slurred on the page. Pleas for money, for forgiveness she didn't have to give. The old ache stirred, hot and familiar, but she set the letter down, meeting Elias's eyes. "Burn it?" he asked. She nodded, and together they fed it to the stove, the flames consuming it in a brief flare. Smoke curling up the chimney like a released sigh. The shift deepened in small gestures. Elias carved her a wooden comb from a fallen branch, its teeth smooth and even, and she ran it through her hair each night, the tangles giving way easier now. She laughed more freely, the sound carrying across the plain as they chased a loose horse, the animal's mane whipping in the wind. Elias joined in, his chuckle low and rusty, like a hinge long unused. At night, stories emerged by the lanterns. Glow he spoke of his wife Sarah, her smile like dawn light, lost to the same fever that took Clara's ma. The child, a boy with eyes like his, buried under a cottonwood that now bloomed white and soft. Clara shared fragments of her own nights under stars with her ma's hymns, the betrayal that sold her for $3. The words bridged the space between them, not healing all, but mending enough. Tension lingered though, like clouds on the horizon. A storm brewed one evening, the sky darkening to bruise purple, thunder rumbling like distant gunfire. They secured the barn, wind tearing at their clothes, rain lashing, cold and relentless. Inside, as lightning cracked the night, Clara felt the old fear rise, vulnerability roar, the risk of hope a blade's edge. Elias lit the lantern, its flame steady amid the chaos, and sat with her by the window, watching the downpour carve gullies in the earth. Storms pass, he murmured. Leave the land cleaner. She leaned against the wall, the wood solid at her back, and let the words settle. The choice to stay reaffirmed in the quiet after the roar. As summer crested, the garden yielded its first harvest, beans crisp and green, corn sweet under the husk. Clara picked them in the early light, the sun warm on her skin, no longer a curse but a gentle touch. Elias stood at the fence, watching, a faint smile creasing his face. She carried the basket inside, the weight satisfying, and for the first time, the ranch felt like more than shelter, like home. Forged from dirt and quiet resolve, the crossroads had passed, the decision rooting deep. Clara walked the plain alone. One dusk, the air cooling, carrying the scent of creosote after rain. The horizon stretched vast, no longer mocking but inviting. She thought of the auction yard, the dust and indifference, and felt the transformation not sudden, but woven. Through days of small mercies, Elias had given her a name, a life, but she'd claimed it for herself, resilient as the land. Autumn winds swept across the plain, carrying the dry rustle of leaves and the faint, earthy scent of harvest's end. Clara stood at the edge of the garden, the soil now turned and resting under a blanket of fallen cottonwood petals, yellow as faded gold. Her hands, calloused but strong, clutched a basket of the last tomatoes, their skins warm from the sun. Juice seeping through splits like quiet wounds. The air hummed with a low buzz of insects, the world alive in its winding down, and she felt the rhythm of the ranch pulse through her a steady beat. No longer foreign. Elias worked in the corral, breaking a young colt with patient hands, his voice a murmur lost to the wind. She watched him from afar, the way he moved with the animal, not forcing but guiding, until it yielded, head bowed in tentative trust. It mirrored her own path, the slow surrender to this life he'd offered. No longer Annie, the girl bartered away, but Clara, clear and unburdened, though shadows of the past still lingered in quiet corners. She set the basket down and walked to the creek, the water running low now, pebbles gleaming under the surface like hidden truths. Memories surfaced gentler these days, not as assaults but as ripples on still water. She thought of her ma humming, while kneading dough, the flour dusting her apron like snow, of her PA broken by loss, his choice as a chain that had bound her until Elias cut it with $3 and a name. The auction yard's dust seemed distant, a faded scar, the sun's curse softened to a caress. Clara dipped her hands in the creek, the cold shocking her skin, washing away the day's dirt. A fish darted by, silver and quick, vanishing into deeper pools, life persisting, unseen but enduring. Evenings brought a deeper ease. They sat on the porch as the sun dipped, painting the sky in hues of fire and bruise, the air cooling to a crisp edge. Elias whittled, shavings curling at his feet like discarded regrets, while Clara mended a shirt, the needle threading sure. Conversation flowed sparse but meaningful. He spoke of plans for spring calves, she of a book she'd found in the barn, words that opened worlds beyond the plain. Laughter came easier, a shared glance over a burned biscuit, the warmth spreading, like lantern light in the dark. But transformation wasn't without its aches. One night a dream pulled her back, the rope chafing, the gavel's crack, the indifferent eyes. She woke gasping, sweat slicked the room pressing in. Elias stirred from his chair by the fire, where he'd dozed over a ledger. Bad one? He asked, voice gravel soft. She nodded, pulling the blanket close. He poured water, handed her the cup, his fingers brushing hers rough, reassuring. Ain't who you are now, he said. That girl's gone, Clara's here. The words anchored her, the dream dissolving like mist in morning light. She sipped the water, cool and clean, feeling the rebirth settle deeper. A quiet acceptance blooming. The ranch thrived under their hands, the land giving back what they poured in. A neighbor stopped by with news of town, eyes no longer appraising, but neighborly. Heard you got a good hand here, he said to Elias, tipping his hat to Clara. She met his gaze steady. No flinch, the old shame sloughed off like dead skin. Elias nodded. Family, he repeated, the words solid as the adobe walls. As the man rode off, dust trailing in his wake, Clara felt the understanding take root, not just survival, but belonging, forged from abandonment's ashes. As winter whispered its approach again, frost etching the windows in delicate patterns, Clara stood outside one dawn. The sun crested the butte, its light golden and forgiving, bathing the plain in a glow that softened the cracks in the earth. The wind carried only silence now, no curses, just the promise of cycles turning. She thought back to that auction block, the heat rising through the planks, the horizon mocking. Now it stretched inviting, a canvas for what came next. Elias joined her, his presence warm at her side, no words needed. The air smelled of sage and possibility. The world no longer indifferent but alive with quiet power. In that light, She felt the transformation complete, not redemption handed down, but earned through small gestures, through risking hope. The $3 had bought more than a life. They'd sparked a rebirth, clear as the sky after a storm.